Hello, my name is Tara May Albert, the Solid Waste Operator Training and Certification Coordinator for the state of New Hampshire. I will be your host for today's recorded session. We are going to be talking about probably the most boring subject ever, paperwork. I understand that it is no fun to do these types of things. However, it is necessary and not just because the rules tell us to. It is true that one of the top compliance issues that we do find when we do inspections is an out of date or missing operating plan and or closure plan at a solid waste facility. Now, you may think that this is not a huge offense or there should be no repercussions, but let me ask you a question. How do you know how to run your facility without an operating plan? Or better yet, when you retire, go on vacation, or are allowed to take a day off, who is running the facility? How are they running the facility? And are they leaving it in disarray for when you come back or when, God forbid, an inspector shows up? Now, if that person had an operating plan giving them instructions on how the facility has run like a well-oiled machine for the last 20 or 30 years, don't you think that would have been of some help? Or if there's something that is definitely not working at the facility, wouldn't it be easier to take it to the boss or to the board of selectmen and say, hey, this is not working. Our operating plan needs to change, and this is how we do it. So before we actually get into the class, we gotta kind of talk about what is an operating plan. It is a document that provides adequate information and detail to allow a trained and certified operator to properly operate their own facility without further explanation or guidance. The plan is meant to be written facility specific. It's basically written in plain language to describe how to operate your facility on a day-to-day basis in compliance with the terms and conditions of your permit, the solid waste rules, which are in ENV SW 100 through 2000, and the state law governing solid waste, which is RSA 149M. The manual is also extremely helpful if it is written specific to your facility to the FNG. We're going to be talking about the FNG a lot today. So for those of you who do not know who the FNG is, it's the freaking new guy. The new guy needs to know how to run the facility in which he or she is working at specifically to that facility and run it well according to that facility, your facility. Basically, it's a how-to manual for all employees. We also are going to be talking about today a closure plan. So this slide should look very, very familiar compared to the last slide that we just had. A closure plan basically provides enough information and detail to allow a third party to implement and complete all tasks needed to close your facility without further explanation or guidance. And we're not talking about closing a facility at the end of the day. We are talking about closure of a facility for a long period of time or indefinite, as opposed to, just at the end of the day. We've told you what an operating and a closure plan are. Who needs them? All permitted solid waste facilities in New Hampshire need an operating plan and a closure plan, an up-to-date operating plan and closure plan. Again, all permitted solid waste facilities, and I'm just going to throw it out there one more time. All permitted solid waste facilities in New Hampshire must have an operating plan and a closure plan that is up to date. Hence why this presentation is so important for you guys. We're going to go into detail about operating plans. We're going to talk about the basic format, the parts of an operating plan, and the execution of building one. Now, we used to have templates for operating plans for transfer stations. But what we found is that the person who was constructing the plan relied heavily on the plan, the template, and did not write it specific to their facility. So what we did is when we rejiggered the rules in 2014 and 2016, the DES Solid Waste Management Bureau created a BMP book that included a lot more than just the BMPs. Every facility should have one of these manuals, and in fact, most operators have one or sections of the book itself. One of the sections is specific to permitting. Within that section is a checklist giving you a summary of what information needs to be included in your operating plan. And that's what we're going to go over in this section of the presentation today. Additionally, the rules that outline what needs to be in an operating plan is in ENV SW 1105. The basic format is pretty simple. The printed copy should be in a loose leaf binder, preferably single-sided, so that changes can be made to a single section and then reprinted. Also, each page should have the page number, the creation revised date, the facility name, location, and permit number in the footer or header. And when we say the facility name, facility location, and permit number, this is the information that is on the actual permit, not what the town calls the facility. So for example, if you live in Samberton, it would be the Samberton transfer station, not the town dump. So it's the permitted name. We understand that if things aren't, also the revision date is particularly important so that the operator can see when the last changes and updates have been made to all day-to-day activities. That's why that date created and revised is a requirement for the permit or for the operating plan. We understand that if things aren't broke, don't fix them. However, if the last date in the footer is over 10 years old, you might want to review and revise the plan. And after that review is done, update the footer. If there are no substantial changes, at least write that date in the footer and make sure it is legible so that when an inspector comes and looks for the operating plan, they can see that you are actively working within that plan. Now that you know the basic format, let's look at the checklist and compare what you currently have in your operating plan and see where you need to make some edits or changes. So section 1 is the facility identification. This is a defined term in the rules. You need to include the facility identification information. Section 2 is the authorized and prohibited wastes. Section 3 is your routine operating plan. Section 4 is the residual waste management plan. Section 5 is the facility maintenance, inspection, and monitoring plan. Section 6 is the contingency plan. Section 7 is employee training. And Section 8 is record keeping and reporting. So these are the 8 sections that need to be included in your operating plan. This would be a time to pause your video, make sure you have your operating plan in front of you. Make sure that you have pens, pencils, sticky notes, highlighters, whatever it is that you need as you are looking through your operating plan to make sure that all 8 of these sections are included in it. While you're grabbing your operating plan, you might as well grab your closure plan as well, because we're going to be going over that after the operating plan section. As I mentioned at the last slide, the facility identification is a defined term in the rules. This is pretty specific and streamlined for you. In addition, the information that is in the operating plan needs to match the information that's on your permit. So all of these line items that are in this slide are included in your permit. So you have it all ready for you. It just needs to now be transpired into your operating plan. So we went over the facility name. This is the actual permitted name, not town dump. You want your mailing address, the location by street and municipality, and your permit number. What type of facility is this? Is this a transfer station? Is it a compost facility? Is it a process and treatment facility? Is it a landfill? What do you got? Include that in this section. The capacity of your facility, the service type, the service area. When we're talking about service area, where do you get your waste? Where is the waste generated that is allowed and permitted to come to your facility? Is it only within the town lines? Is it from a county? Is it from a specific business? Where are you acquiring your waste that comes to your facility? Where is it generated? You also need to include the name, address, and telephone number of the permittee, property owner, and operator. All of this information is very important, especially if there is an emergency or if someone is at your facility and they need assistance right away. Your operating plan should be something you pull right up off the shelf and you say, okay, this is who we have to call in regards to this, this, or this. Next is your authorized and prohibited waste. This section is pretty simple. You look at your permit. What does it say? There are some things that you are prohibited to accept per rule. However, there may be some things that you, the permittee, has decided that you will not accept. So for example, solid waste facilities are prohibited from accepting industrial hazardous waste under the solid waste rules. You may not take that at your facility. You are not authorized to accept that. It is against the rules. However, that's the rule portion. You, as the permittee, may determine that you do not want to accept propane tanks at your facility. This would be something that should be added to the section of the operating plan regarding prohibited wastes. If you have chosen not to accept them, that is perfectly okay. You need to put it in your operating plan. In addition, the plan should outline what to do in case you are gifted items that are prohibited. This could also include giving your customers options with how to dispose of these items. So in the beginning of this training, I mentioned the FNG. This type of information would be very helpful for the new guy. If the new guy's out helping somebody on a very busy Saturday morning, he or she would like to be able to go back to the operating plan and be like, you know what, we can't take this, or have read the operating plan to know that they cannot accept that specific type of waste, rather than trying to find a manager who is probably busy running around trying to help other customers. So this is how everyone gets trained on the same page. And that page is specific, again, to your permitted facility. The next section is routine operating plan. So this section is probably going to be the longest section of your operating plan. This is the section where the generic template was not working. The point is to tailor the operating plan towards your facility and not leave it to a guessing game for employees. So the first two bullets here are pretty easy to assess for your facility specifically. So let's take a look at the third, waste acceptance. This one piece alone should address all of those wastes in the previous section and how they are handled when they are brought to the facility. When the new guy is left at the facility, what should he or she do if someone brings in fireworks? You all know your customers. If they are asked to either bring it back or pay too much for it without explanation, you know you're going to find it either on the side of the road or at the gate the next morning. Use the operating plan to your advantage to address these issues and have the new guy know fireworks, we do not accept them. They need to go to the fire station, or we do accept them, but we accept them in this area, and then we need to call the fire station for them to manage it. So take a look at your operating plan. Are specific wastes addressed? If not, you need to add them in. This is where those sticky notes are going to be helpful. The operating plan is a living document, and changes can and should be made to it. So again, like I said, this is going to be your longest section. Routine operating plan sections or items 4 and 5. The next two bullets, they're paperwork issues. How will you determine recording the quantity, sources, and destinations of all the waste received and outgoing? For those of you who have been doing this a while, you know that there's something called an annual facility report. This is information that needs to be submitted each year to DES. We use this information to determine how waste is moving throughout the state. It helps us to determine public benefit and gives us an insight into the future of the state of solid waste in New Hampshire. This also will help you in determining numbers 4 and 5 in your routine operating plan. This information should be included in the plan and updated as necessary each year as you go through your operating time. So the next bullet is the storage time and capacity limits. Tell us what you receive at your facility, how long they're usually there, and the procedures in which they will be monitored. Again, let's use propane tanks as an example. How many do you have on site at any given time, do you think? What's the maximum amount? How often then do you move those off site? How long are they on site? You need to actively manage those propane tanks. Number 7. So these are really things that you already do. They just might not be on paper. If I asked you the following questions for glass, what are your answers? How do you manage your glass? MSW, source separation, single stream, etc. For this example, we're going to say source separated. So you do accept them. How do your customers know what to do with glass? Do you allow them to add it to the proper containers, or do you or your staff members do that? How do you know if you receive glass that you cannot accept, or that it has been mixed with your recyclable glass and you can't take it? When do you add a measurement of the glass that you accepted? Is it a container full, a gaylord? How do you record that measurement? And then also, where did that waste come from? Is it from your residents, your town, neighboring towns, businesses? Where did it come from? So I want you to think about this may seem a bit overburdensome from glass, but think about it as if we were talking about MSW. It would be helpful to know this information and how it's managed. Makes you think, now what? How do we manage it? The next section in your operating plan is residual waste management. In an operating plan, this section may be very small or may be long. And that's great for me to say that. But what the heck is residual waste? Residual waste is just as it says. It is a waste that is left over or residual. So whether you work at a single stream MRF or a C&D processing center, you will be left with the waste that cannot be used in your process. With that said, it's really hard to find residual waste at a transfer station. The best example I could come up with is any waste left over during a glass crushing activity, such as when you're doing a certified waste derived product. There are specific specifications that the glass must meet, and if they do not meet that specification, then the leftovers are waste. And so all of these things need to be addressed when you are working on your residual waste management plan. And the information to demonstrate how the provisions of this will be met are in 110510. So we're not leaving you to just hanging out there. You can go right to the rules and pull up all of this information. The next section is the maintenance, inspection, and monitoring plan. This seems like a lot, but you need to identify all of your routine maintenance, inspections, and monitoring requirements. Why? Because you want to make sure that these list of things here don't happen. What happens if there's spontaneous combustion? What are your fire hazards that come into the facility, and how are you going to mitigate those? Methane, generation of methane, hazardous and explosive gases. How are you going to handle that? Odors. If you haven't yet, you are eventually going to get complaints from your neighbors about odors. How are you going to manage those odors? You also need to be aware of any leachate spills, windblown litter, dust, anything that comes into the facility. You're going to need to address it. And then anything else, any other potential or anticipated hazards or nuisances that could happen at your facility. This is the in case this happens list. How are you going to manage it? So I want you to take a second here, look at your operating plan and see if you address any of these issues. And if you do, is it in this section or is it in a different section? I'll give you a second to think about that. If you need some more time, feel free to pause the video. All right. So this section is the contingency plan. Why do you need a contingency plan? Well, it's kind of like insurance. In case something happens, this is what you need to do. So this video was recorded in 2021. We all know what happened in 2020. On this slide, when we did this class the first time, we never, ever anticipated a pandemic. We were banking on fires, explosions, maybe some weather-related incidences, maybe operator injuries. We never, ever, ever anticipated a pandemic. But what did you guys all have to do? You all had to stop, scramble, and figure out what you were going to do now that things are shutting down, now that you need to keep yourself safe. Do you wear masks? Do you not wear masks? Do you open your swap shop? Do you not open your swap shop? What are you going to do? Each facility is going to handle it a little different. Your contingency plan right now should have a whole page on what happens if there's a pandemic. You all deal with the public, whether you are a municipal facility or a private facility. You all are dealing with customers and the public. How are you going to handle this if there is another pandemic, or if this current middle of pandemic that we're in goes back into what it looked like last year in 2020? You need to address this in your contingency plan. You also need to address all of the other things, the fires, the explosions, the injuries. Who's responsible for what? How are they going to stay? How are you going to stay in contact with everyone? You need to identify the people that are going to be in charge. Get telephone numbers. Emails may or may not work. You need to be able to talk to these people. You also need to describe the appropriate response of facility personnel. Some facility personnel may not be included in the contingency plan at all, and that's okay. Their proper place may be not to be at the facility, but you need to determine who should be there, who shouldn't be there, and who's going to be doing what. And this year, I think we learned this more than any other. So beef up that contingency plan. Make sure you are ready for what is to come. And if you have questions, again, you can call us at DES. The next section is your employee training section. You must provide a description of the employee training programs. What are you doing to train your facilities? What is the purpose of the training that you are conducting, or the purpose of the training for each individual? And then how often is the training? You all know that to work at a solid waste facility in New Hampshire, you must go through the SWAT program. That is great, but it's only 2.5 hours of training each year. I want you to really look and see, what do your operators need to know about? You've got DES training, there's training through the NRRA, EPA does training. You guys probably do in-house training where you talk about different safety measures and different equipment that you have. There also is your insurance, and Primex is the insurance body for most municipal facilities. What does Primex have to offer out there? You guys need to make sure that all of the operators, everyone who's working at the facility, is properly trained to work at the facility, because you know as well as I know that you are not just dealing in municipal solid waste. You have many other things that are coming into the facility, and we want to make sure that you guys are all trained on what it is that you need to do to manage and handle all the waste that comes in. Next is record keeping and reporting. This section sometimes is the hardest because we forget about the record keeping and reporting. You must provide a description of the record keeping procedures as necessary. It's got to comply with ENV SW 110506 and 07. We strongly suggest keeping a copy of those two sections. I'll say it again, 1105 and 1106. In your operating plan, a copy of those rules, to make sure that if something happens, you know that you're like, okay, yes, we're meeting our requirements. You need the records of all phases of operation. What's the maintenance at the facility? And they all need to be maintained at the facility. You need to make sure that all of these records are made available for inspectors. They are not to be locked away in a cabinet where only one person's able to see them. You also, when the facility does close, they need to be maintained in an approved location, approved by DES. Where are these records being kept once that facility is closed for good? So, and then they need to be, the 110507, it's required to notify the department when specific changes occur. You also need to know that you need to submit your annual facility report on March 31st. The changes in control as applicable. So whether it is a change in the town ownership, who is running the facility, whether it's you've brought in a third party to run the facility, or if it's a private company and your board of trustee members changes, we need to know all of that. And then additional activities may need approval and additional studies to be done at the facility. There are so many different things for record keeping and reporting that fall under those categories. You need to notify the department that you are following along with that record keeping and reporting. So check those two rules out. And if you notice that there's something missing, give us a call and we can assist you in getting yourselves caught back up. So I'm going to give you guys a second here to find your closure plans and pull those out. So the closure plan, much like the operating plan, has a specific set of sections and a basic format. The basic format of the closure plan is very similar to that of the operating plan. The printed copy should be a loose leaf binder, preferably single-sided, so that changes can be made to a single section and then reprinted. Also, each page should have a page number, creation revised date, facility name, location, and permit number in the footer. The revision date, again, is particularly important so that the operator can see the last changes and updates that have been made to those closure plans. And again, we understand if things aren't broke, you may not need to fix it, you may not need to address it or change it. However, we want to make sure that that revised date that is there, that you guys have been paying attention and updating the plan as necessary. Now that you know the basic format, let's look at the checklist and compare what you have in the plan to see how you make some changes and edits. So section 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There are 9 sections and parts of a closure plan. Many of them are the same. You've got your facility identification is the same as the operating plan. Something different, closure schedule. We'll talk about that a little bit. Waste identification, notifications, closure requirements. You've also got a post-closure requirement. So if you close your facility and there is still waste at the facility, you're going to have post-closure requirements. Record keeping and reporting, other permits that you may also have on that same facility will need to be included in that closure plan to make sure that they are taken care of and properly managed. And then a closure cost estimate. This cost, it puts in the cost of what it might be to actually close your facility. And there is a closure process. So prior to commencing closure activities, the permittee must notify DES in writing. So you need to include the following things: your facility identification, the date the facility intends to stop receiving waste. It's very important. The copy of the approved facility closure plan. So I say approved in quotations. For non-permit by notification facility, this is the one that we approved, the DES approved. And hopefully it is up to date because we approved it when you got your permit, unless you have submitted modifications along the way. For those permit by notification facilities, the most up-to-date plan on file at your facility is what needs to be followed. Again, for all facilities, you need to update the plan as needed. So this closure plan, let's talk about municipal landfills. There are many unlined municipal landfills in New Hampshire. At the time of closure for those facilities, there was a closure plan that was put together. Most of those closure plans were submitted in the 1980s. How many of them have been updated? I don't know. That is something that needs to be addressed. Those closure plans need to be looked at to make sure that it still makes sense for the closed landfill that is still accessible and still being monitored and still being maintained. That landfill will be a forever permit as long as the waste is still in the ground. So now that we've talked about operating plans and closure plans, so when are operating and closure plans required? And then where are they required to be kept? So we've gone over this I think I've said it 4 or 5 times now. All permit required solid waste facilities are required to prepare an operating plan and closure plan when you are first applying for your permit. So when you submit your permit application, you also should have an operating plan and a closure plan that are fully put together and fully developed. For non-permit by notification facilities, DES approves these plans. You submit them with your application. For those facilities that are a permit by notification facility, and pull out your permit, it'll say permit by notification, if it is. DES does not approve these plans, and you do not need to submit them to us. However, you still need to have them available. You need to make sure that they are put together before you apply for that permit. And then, of course, you do need to update the plans as necessary. You need to review the plans at least annually. So I talked about at the bottom of each of those pages where you need to make sure that the date is updated. You need to make sure that you do update that plan as appropriate. You also can put as an addendum in your operating plan a sheet of paper that is kind of has a table of a review date and who reviewed it. You can include that as a record in your operating plan itself. So where do you have to store these plans? And this, I want to highlight, it's required by rule. This is where you need to store these plans. They must be stored at the facility. This does not mean the town hall. This means the facility. You must have these operating closure plans at the facility. They must be available to operators. So when you have the FNG start at the facility, he or she should have access to the operating plan and closure plan and should actually spend some time reviewing the operating plan and closure plan. This is also, having them review it is also really helpful to find if you've got some gaps or some changes that need to be made to your operating or closure plans. Again, they must be made available to DES inspectors upon request. When we come to your facility, we're going to ask you to see these things. You need to have them. It is an infraction if you do not. It is a compliance issue if you do not have them available. And then, of course, it's a good practice to have a backup. Just in case. You may need a backup at the town hall for municipalities, or for, if there's say a fire at the transfer station, you need to have a backup copy. You need to make sure that that backup copy is also up to date. So if they have a printed copy, you need to make sure that the printed copy that the town hall has as a backup is up to date. You also could save it on a flash drive or a CD. Do people use CDs anymore? Having a backup copy is going to give you peace of mind. So preparation and updates. So how to prepare and update your plan. Use the best management checklist. We have provided you with best management checklists. They are online. You also can do it yourself, or you can hire a consultant to do it. Be mindful that these plans are to be written in a way so that operators can read and understand the plans. They are not meant to be written in engineering jargon. You need to understand that plan, and it needs to be plain language. You can have your employees review the operating plan to make sure it follows what they actually do. And then remember, DES inspectors, we will ask to see that plan. I will leave you with this slide. Who has homework? I'm sure you all have some sort of homework and some sort of operating plan review that you need to do. Remember, use your resources. You can always call us at DES. You can always go to the town hall. You can use your permit. Make sure you follow up on your resources. Thank you and have a good day.